Well, today we're going to talk about the question, can citizens, e.g. the little guy, make a difference in this age of globalism as the globalists take over your local council and your school board down the street? With me here today to talk about how citizens can make a difference in their local communities is none other than Maggie Hope Braun. Welcome, Maggie.
Hello, thank you for having me here today. Excited to be here.
Well, Maggie, it's great to have you because you are the founding president of KICLEI, and it's a fascinating example of citizens coming together to fight back, I think, frankly, globalist policies that are really making an impact across this country as we look at, local councils and local school boards. So can you tell us from the top, what is KICLEI?
So KICLEI stands for Kicking ICLEI, the International Council, out of our local environmental initiatives. And, we've identified different organizations that have come forth from the United Nations way back in 1990 and found that they've been working alongside our Federation of Canadian Municipalities and really changing the values of that organization and making it more about pushing federal and international policies than representing the voices of local government. So along with that, we're having great success.
So just to back up here for a sec. So KICLEI is an organization that you founded, and it's interesting. The acronym is really about kicking out the internationalists, the globalists that are pushing a lot of environmental agenda that's making a big impact on Canadian lives. So can you give us an example? I find that fascinating in this day and age where we hear lots of stories where you have these climate summits where people fly off to them with hundreds of private jets as they lecture us on, to not even fly or to actually keep our heads down and really industrialize our economy. It's really quite amazing what you're doing here.
Yeah, so the KICLEI, it's all about getting people engaged in what is happening on their local agenda. So, as I said, we've identified that the global agenda is actually being implemented more so at the local level than anywhere else as far as how it's directly impacting our lives and our communities. And at the same time, we're paying attention to that yearly retreat to Davos, and it feels that we can't do anything about that. But everything that they're saying at that level and the federal level is really just smoke and mirrors. That when it comes down to it, every month at your local town council, they're being faced with reports that are coming forth from international lobbyists. And if we're not even in the building to say anything to oppose it, the councillors are left passing these recommendations. And it's been happening for 30 years. And we're putting a stop to that by just simply showing up and getting involved and saying something respectfully.
Okay. So this is interesting. So as we have been, trying to make our daily lives, going to work, looking after our families, there's a whole international movement that has got to just about, would you say, every local council across our country pushing all kinds of policies that may or may not help us.
Yeah, there's, I think, 4,000 municipalities in Canada. Most of them are members of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, who's partnered with the United Nations and ICLEI. And not all of them are going along with the agenda. And that's what's very interesting. There are, everywhere you look, there's a handful that have a very local strategic plan and local agenda. And then the majority of them have what appears to be a blueprint of the same plans, the same language, and the same agenda being moved forward in the majority of Canadian municipalities. So that to me tells me and other Canadians that the local agenda can be shifted back to a truly local agenda instead of bringing forward these policies.
Okay, so I want to understand the basics here.
Mm-hmm.
So who are these organizations? Like, who funds them? Like, is it Klaus Schwab and Company? I know that Klaus Schwab is just, quote, retired from the World Economic Forum, but who's pushing this agenda? And can you give us an example?
So two examples are the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, FCM, and ICLEI, the International Council on Local Environmental Initiatives. Let's start with ICLEI. ICLEI was founded by the United Nations in 1990, and it is funded through memberships. So municipalities across the world can become a member of ICLEI. And it's also funded by corporate sponsors like Google, which is partly owned by the Alphabet corporations and BlackRock and Vanguard and so on. Mm-hmm. And then the Federation of Canadian Municipalities is again funded by memberships from member municipalities, but also by the federal government and the Green Municipal Fund. So in order for Canadian municipalities to access federal funds, they are being asked to adopt programs from the FCM to access that money. And in a sense, that is a funding mechanism that allows the federal and international organizations to access the local government and, in a sense, bypass the constitutional mandate where municipalities are directly under the province and not under the federal government. So the federal government isn't supposed to have that much to do with local government.
Okay, so we know in Canada that's according to our constitution, the provinces have responsibility to look after the local governments. That's who's responsible for local government. And yet you have the federal government. You said they have a green fund that is funded by both the federal government and also United Nations money as well. Is that correct?
I think it's mainly the federal government is funding the Green Municipal Fund.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. But the federal government has said, in order for you as a local government to access these, quote, green funds to improve the environment, and who doesn't want to look at, in principle, to improve the environment, in order to access them, you've got to follow this international body's program. Is that basically it?
Yes. And when you look at the FCM's website, their programs, what we find is that all of their programs are essentially in line with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And that is the main organization that is making it easier for municipalities to access the federal funds. So they sign up as members for the FCM. They start applying for grants, and to make it easier to get the grants, they sign up for the programs and therefore adopt the global agenda into the local agenda. And every municipal plan going forward from there is being influenced by international policies.
Okay, so this sounds like quite a strategy to, as you say, take international policy from the United Nations, environmental policy in this case, and systematically move it through, with the assistance of the federal government, through all these municipal organizations like the Canadian Federation of Municipalities. I remember I was a member of that organization years ago as a former mayor. I thought they were pretty good for networking and learning. But gosh, it sounds like it's changed a little bit in terms of its focus to actually be adopting these larger environmental policies. And so what's wrong with that? Is that sounds like a good idea in principle. Like, you're not against the environment, Maggie, are you?
No, I'm just against a lack of fiscal responsibility and common sense, I think. And you look around at our communities and the way our country is set up, we have the municipal government, the provincial government, and the federal government, and they're each responsible for they have a core mandate, each one of them, and they're not supposed to overstep each other's responsibilities. And the municipal priorities are really important to our communities, and we're seeing a lack of focus in the councils on what they should be focused on. So the roads, safe communities, clean streams and parks, basic things like that, opening up land for development, for homes to be built, all of that. And every agenda that we look at where they've really bought into this program, it seems that most of the reports and plans coming forward, the first line opens with climate change, sustainable development, CO2 reductions, and spending money on the CO2 reduction programs. And the issue there is that climate change is not a municipal responsibility. It's not at all part of that mandate. And if they're redirecting millions and billions of dollars at the municipal level across all the municipalities in Canada, that's a lot of money being redirected away from community issues to chase negligible CO2 reduction targets.
Okay, so this is where I think you're making a very interesting argument, Maggie, is that you have this international body working with the federal government to really put their nose into the provincial business of the local governments, to push policies that they envision being the centerpiece of local government, when in fact local government has extremely important mandates. And to do those basics well, like whether, as you mentioned, roads are to water and sewer and all kinds of things. It's not to say that they can't help the environment because they're at the front lines of it, but this is going somewhere else. So can you give an example where this kind of international policy actually, you would say, does harm to the lives of citizens in their communities?
Well, across the country, we have a nationwide homelessness issue, mental health crisis, and drug addiction crisis. So that is showing up in every community across the country. And at the same time, municipalities are signing up for these programs. They're being asked to spend, say, $13 million to reduce on a green fleet plan. So to electrify their fleet and reduce annual emissions of CO2 by 400 tons a year. When we do the math on 400 tons of CO2 per year, that works out to 13 billionth of 1% of CO2 in the Earth's atmosphere. It's such a negligible reduction. So they're spending $13 million. Imagine what a community could do with $13 million to address homelessness or whatever their main priorities are, and stop chasing these reduction targets. And we see it in every report, one after the other. And this is the reason why we're seeing it in all of the reports that have to do with spending. So it really takes over our local budget, is they have programs like the Municipal Asset Management Fund. And that makes it so, and this is from the FCM, it makes it so that every expense that the municipality looks at, they have to run it through the climate lens, right? So talk about indoctrination. As a councillor, if you're in a municipality signed up for this, every time you go into your council, you're seeing a report, and it's every time, how much are we going to reduce CO2 with this? And it makes it seem like it's a top priority, but it's not even, as I keep saying,
interesting.
I mean, it's not even a municipal responsibility. So,
okay. So that's very interesting, because what you're saying then is it's inserted itself into the local government policy process. So that instead of doing the basics well, like transportation, looking after people through those services that local governments are mandated to do, climate change / alarmism has gone to the top in some cases. Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
In
So
many cases.
in this case, then you had the leadership gumption
Hmm.
to say, I want to form an organization and team up with other citizens who are seeing this train wreck happen before our eyes and do something about it. So can you tell us your story in a nutshell about why you started up this incredible organization called KICLEI?
KICLEI is such a wonderful thing. It's an organization that really started itself. I think that the need for leadership in our country is there's a lack of leadership in our country. There's a void, and we are a very large country, a small population, and we're very dispersed. So if we want to tackle the global agenda here in Canada, we need to start doing that at the local level in our town halls where we can have an influence, because we can't just drive to Ottawa every time there's an issue. And they would probably tell us to go home, wouldn't they? So we might as well start the revolution of civic engagement and pushing back on the global agenda at the local level. And really what an interesting thing to discover that the global agenda is, for the most part, being implemented at the local level in empty council chambers with little civic engagement and awareness that this is happening. And now in Canada, we have action groups that have come together and organized over the last 5 years or so. People are looking for what can we do to make a difference. And the strategies that we've been testing out and sharing with others and encouraging others to try out are working. So it's giving people hope that their concerns can be heard and that there is still a level of working democracy, and it's found at that municipal local level. And then with KICLEI, it again,
Well, that's
like I
very
said,
inspiring.
it started itself. It just, there was such a need for something like this and for somebody to set that example. And I'm really honored that the
So
ideas that are,
was there something specifically, Maggie, was there something specifically that precipitated you to go full feet in and dive into the world of citizen action?
I guess I've always known ever since I was about 20 that the local municipal plans were being influenced by the United Nations. I didn't know what the mechanism was for that. And it wasn't until a couple of years ago when I met like-minded people in my area that we really wanted to do something, and something together in our community. And we looked at the local agenda at council and found that they were aiming for net zero and that they were affiliated with these international NGOs and that they were very upfront about monitoring and tracking our progress towards the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and looking at ways to target our mobility. And we thought, you know what? Let's try it. Let's go in and speak to this on their agenda. And we figured out the delegation process. And then I started looking at how the international lobbyists were getting their recommendations adopted and learned, okay, we got to start meeting them on the battleground. If they're submitting a report with recommendations, we need to submit a report with recommendations. If they're doing a petition, we have to do a petition. We can't just sit back and complain and worry about the future when there's so much we can do in the here and now to make a difference. Even if it's just showing up to your local council and wearing a KICLEI t-shirt or bringing a bag that says localism over globalism, or signing up your councils to the KICLEI newsletter and making sure that they're getting it, right? So We do have about 8,000
Isn't that fascinating?
counselors signed up for that newsletter now. So it's growing.
So your movement is growing, and I just find it fascinating that, many people would assume that a lot of the globalist movement is really through national governments, the point of international contact, but it isn't. They have basically jumped over, leapfrogged, if you will, over our provincial governments right to the municipal level.
Yeah.
And that's where they're doing their implementation to a large degree. So this is impacting people's lives. There's no mystery as to why Canadians are experiencing, challenges when it comes to affordability. They see all kinds of, depending on which municipality you're in, a lot of movement to build high density homes as they try to, promote that model of living. It shouldn't be, a single family home, but rather high density apartments. Is that what you're seeing then? Is that policy is really impacting Canadians?
Yeah, the entire housing crisis, it's related to the development scheme known as sustainable development. And if this is the development scheme that Canada has adopted, a development scheme that redirects population growth away from small towns and rural areas to high density urban housing, it is no wonder that after 30 years, bylaws have changed and local policies have changed to make it more expensive and less convenient to live in rural small town Canada. And slowly people are finding it very unaffordable to buy a home in the country. Imagine that. And of course, we move into the city and there it's very expensive as well, and a lack of housing. And we have an entire urban crisis taking place. And it's all related to the development scheme we've adopted as a country. And we need to change and provide options to our councils that there is other ways to look at development.
But I think that's a fantastic example, Maggie, where these international policy agendas and ways of thinking, centralizing government control over everything, is really impacting people's lives. This is why, to a large degree, we have an affordability crisis in different parts of this country, particularly when it comes to housing, where the largest cost, and you can see this at Frontier where we do this research a lot, we confirm that the largest cost of a house is not the house, it's the land cost. And that land cost is driven by the zoning bylaws implemented by the local governments that really kind of, squish people together in terms of density. And that's what's really creating an affordability crisis. And so you see that right up front, right across the nation. Is that right, Maggie?
Yeah, absolutely. We're in a country that is 89% completely uninhabited. We have no shortage of land. So the fact that land is unaffordable says that we're in need of a great policy change when it comes to our land. And yet we're more concerned about reducing CO2 by 13 billionth of 1% annually and transitioning our green fleet, right? So the priorities are completely out of line.
It's absurd. So why is the idea, though, of voluntary participation so important when it comes to climate and sustainability programs? What do you think's going on there when you talk about voluntary participation?
So most Canadians and most counselors don't realize that all the climate programs, all the ideological programs and policies are completely voluntary. And, they're presented as essential and necessary. And the issue is that they're being tricked. So our counselors are being tricked in the joining resolutions of these programs with language that makes them sound essential and necessary. And the fact that they're voluntary is something that we need to create more public awareness around. And that's what we're doing with KICLEI and with our delegations, is we're reminding our counselors and letting them know that they've signed up for these programs and that these programs are voluntary and that they have the authority to leave at any time. So along with that is the Paris Accord, for instance, is used in the joining resolution, and it makes it sound official. Okay, Canada has signed up for the Paris Accord, and
wait a sec. What is the Paris Accord, Maggie?
So the Paris Accord is an international treaty that was signed among nations at the federal level, saying that they would work together to limit the global temperature increase to below 2 degrees Celsius. And that is what the Paris Accord, and along with that is they set reduction targets. So what most people don't realize about the Paris Accord is it is, again, like I said, signed at the federal level, and it only is in relation to the federal government and the industries that are under their jurisdiction.
Yeah, Paris Accord is kind of like an international pact or agreement that sets certain climate targets, and Canada bought into this. And so they're trying to move the needle to move those, quote, targets regarding CO2 reduction. And what's so absurd about this is this will change the lives of Canadians, all because somebody thinks that carbon dioxide is a pollutant.
When I started looking at the Paris Accord, because I saw it in the joining resolutions for the Partners for Climate Protection program, which is one of the main programs we're looking at. And I wondered, are municipalities legally bound to the Paris Accord? And what I found is that they're not. It is agreed to at the federal level, and the federal government is responsible for it. The municipal councils aren't signatories to this pact. So the only way that they can get municipalities to adopt the reduction targets is if they get them to sign onto their own mini Paris Accord. And that's why I'm going after, with KICLEI, the Partners for Climate Protection program from the FCM and ICLEI, because that is the mini municipal Paris Accord. And this is being signed on to by councils who don't realize the long-term impact of it, and their communities aren't being consulted whatsoever on whether or not they want to sign on to the Paris Accord, essentially, and to make that their main agenda item.
So I'm hearing one of your key points, Maggie, is that you want more open, transparent debate at the local level, so people in the community know the significance that these policies exist and their impact on people's lives. And then you need to have an honest debate and say, hey, are we really buying into this? Because it sounds like too often these policies are being adopted at the local level, perhaps with good intentions, but they don't understand the impact that it's going to have on their own residents. And the residents don't even know this, and they don't have a voice. I mean, it's like a kind of a bad cycle, isn't it, Meg?
Yeah, we see after a few years of a community running this program, Oxford County, where we've just done delegations, is a good example. They joined in 2017. They did a public survey in 2022. The residents said that their top priorities were affordable housing, safe communities, taking care of their parks and trails for walking, and their farmland preservation. And they had a list of 26 priorities for the residents to pick. Those were the top 4. Climate change was 17th out of the priorities on that. And yet 17th, right? So, and yet the issues of affordable housing and safe communities and safe walking trails and preserving their farmland are still big issues that aren't being fully addressed here. But what is being addressed continuously is net zero by 2050 and CO2 reductions.
Yes,
And
right.
so the community starts to lose faith in their council working for them. You know, they start to wonder, well, we told you what we wanted you to focus on, and you have moved our 17 to number 1, and you didn't have our permission to do that. So,
Okay, so but you're onto something in the sense that these changes of policy then from the international level to the local level have really gone unnoticed. They've gone in there really under the cover of darkness, so to speak, because people are busy with their lives.
yeah.
These policies are embedded. And meanwhile, people are trying to speak up about their priorities. They want their road fixed. They want the basic services of the municipality to do their job. And yet everything's kind of being embedded with this policy and every decision to shift that. And so this would create, I imagine, a lot of quiet frustration, and people may not even know this is impacting their lives. And they're wondering, well, why is life unaffordable? And they don't seem to be listening to my concerns. But I can see how this is kind of an ingenious way to kind of make the local government a proxy, an arm of this international agenda. Am I being too dramatic or simplistic about this?
Not at all. I think I care what happens at the federal and provincial level, but the more I observe what is happening at the local level, I think that they have intentionally tried to keep us from being interested in local municipal politics. And maybe I'm getting conspiratorial, but I feel like we get distracted by things that are outside of our circle of influence sometimes. And we are at kind of a breaking point of being frustrated and angry and trying to get ahead of this agenda now that it's really entrenched. But it's working.
Well, it's really something, because I know that you're making progress, Maggie. Can you give an example? And I know you've made a huge impact really across the country. And in many ways, you've only been around a couple years working at this. Can you share an example where you feel like you've had great success working with local citizens to make a difference here?
So I send the KICLEI newsletter out, and every time we do delegations, we share that on our KICLEI YouTube channel. And I think people are just getting really inspired by that. And I'm an idea person, and I don't know if there's much order to the ideas that come. I just kind of act on my motivation and inspiration and write and share. And I've seen here in Oxford County and other places where I'll go and I'll meet organizers who are doing this work, who have been inspired by KICLEI, and they will have full filing cabinets of articles, and they'll have categorized them and all the deputation scripts and their local municipal reports and newspaper articles. And, you know, they are laying this out in a beautiful, organized way, and really finally getting into their local agenda, reading through all these plans, finding the motions of when they've joined these programs, and ready to go. And here in Oxford County, they had almost 800 people sign the petition to withdraw from the Partners for Climate Protection program. We did 2 delegations to their council yesterday. 130 people showed up, which essentially, according to the rules of civic engagement, if one person showing up in person represents 1,000 people who care about that issue, they did everything right here in Oxford County. And people are seeing the vision of what it is that we can do and what it is that we need to do in order to win this. And they're pulling it together. So I'm encouraged every time I go and speak with a group that has been inspired by the KICLEI message, because they have different talents and skills that they're able to teach the rest of Canada along with me now, right? This is how they organized locally.
Okay.
And yeah.
So can you explain, how do you work with a local community and give an example of success? Like, how do you work with the community? They contact you and then you walk with them. Tell us how that works.
Yeah, so there's a lot of ways to get involved and start working together as a community. Some people will just initiate on their own, as they did here in Oxford County. They'll reach out if they have any questions, but they'll essentially start going to their local councils and getting involved and paying attention. People will reach out through joining the Join Us form, which is a way that we can notify you if something is happening in your area. They will reach out through email as well and send scripts of what it is that they would like to share with their council and ask for feedback. Or they'll share plans with me of the climate action plans and so on, and we'll start going back and forth through email on that. But essentially, joining the KICLEI newsletter, starting to pay attention, join us at the regular Zoom meetings that we have to strategize nationally and provincially. On KICLEI's website, I created a support page. So it basically links to a KICLEI configured chat GPT. So everything, all of my reports, all of my information has been configured into that chat GPT. So you could essentially put your questions within that and it will answer as if it was me. So that is, and it will help you write letters to your council. It will help you draft reports. It will help you draft petitions. It will help you do press releases. And, for people who are open to trying that, it is a great tool and I recommend, people give it a try.
Okay. So people can look at your website. They can see all kinds of tools where people can understand if they're concerns about these policies, how to speak up, where to speak up, and basically what are key points of background that would be helpful to them so that they can make an impact.
Yes.
So Maggie, on that note, what success have you had?
So what we've been able to do so far, going from the very first one, our first delegation, we created massive public awareness that the global agenda is being implemented at the local level through organizations like KICLEI. Our second delegation filled the room, presented our concerns about the official plan for Peterborough County, and that council voted to delay that official plan and seek better public consultation. So we proved municipal councils aren't just working for the agenda. They will work for us if we engage with them through the process that we have available to us in civic engagement. Then we moved on and we discovered the Partners for Climate Protection program, and we found a council with a couple councillors who wanted to withdraw from this key net zero program. And through petitions and delegations and a couple emails to the council, we were able to get them to withdraw from the Partners for Climate Protection program. So we found, there is hope. All is not lost. The local councillors, they're not all being placed there to officially push this program. There's only a couple on the councils who know about the program and are pushing it. The rest are just going along with it, waiting for us to show up and tell them what we want them to do about this. Since then, we've done a whole bunch of reports on the Partners for Climate Protection program, and we've seen councils initiate cost analysis on the program, start looking at their carbon sequestration and the fact that Canada is already net negative in carbon because of our trees and wetlands and so on. And we've seen, this is a big one too, counties and towns start to pull out from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities altogether, and recognizing that it is no longer the voice for all Canadian municipalities, that it is pushing urban-centric views and programs, policies, and ideology. And Wheatland County called for a boycott of the FCM conference and a unified stance among rural municipal councils across Canada. And others are just pulling out altogether of the FCM. So we really have no idea how this is indirectly changing the narrative and the talking, what is acceptable to say within a local council, right? If we've gone into and said common sense out loud, it empowers local councils to speak up, and then we overtake the narrative.
Interesting. So you've made some significant progress. Peterborough County is an example. There's others, Oxford now recently. But the point is that you are helping to empower citizens to speak up and say, do these policies make sense from an international, like to take international policies and implement them, at the local level that will make a big impact on the success and viability of the community. And I guess when I look at this, I'm wondering to what extent there's a bigger picture that we've had, for example, a federal government that has pursued a war on Canadian oil and gas as one example among many others to really, in effect, shut down that industry. And that should be, we know that energy that's reliable, dependable, affordable is foundational to any advanced economy, including Canada. And it's all related to manufacturing, mining, forestry, everything, really. And yet they want to shut it down. And I think this is where, is that effort all linked to this effort?
I think so. What comes to mind as you're talking about the resource industry is a lot of the proposals, they'll say for electric fleet transition, right? Away from gas-powered vehicles to EV vehicles. They will talk about how they are saving money in the long run. But I think of it as, okay, they're only looking at a couple metrics. If by saving them money in the long run, they are killing industries, shutting down, taking out people's jobs, is it really beneficial for the community as a whole, right? And Saskatchewan, we saw a great resolution there where the Rural Municipal Association of Saskatchewan last year passed a resolution saying that CO2 was not a pollutant and that they would no longer endorse net zero by 2050 policies because they were harmful to their communities and economies. So what does that say? It's one thing to say we're going to save a little bit of money because we're getting an EV vehicle. Not everyone in Canada can afford an EV vehicle. It's a luxury item for them, and most people wouldn't want one in Canadian winter anyway.
Well, exactly. And it depends who's doing the analysis. You look at EV vehicles, we know that batteries are expensive. They may or not last very long. You have issues around their practical chargeability and range. I mean, the whole issue of EVs is very complicated, especially if you look at the whole rare earth minerals issue and the ethics around that with little kids mining it in, somewhere. So we have a situation here where there's a lot of policies that I would argue are actually not policies. It's really more ideological in nature, as you've hinted to, Maggie. And that's harmful to people's lives because they're not based on reality. I think that's the problem, isn't it, Maggie?
It is. I really would love to share the CO2 calculator because it really comes down to this at the local council level. So the CO2 calculator is a tool that we can use across the country, councillors, residents, when they are looking at what is on their local agenda. What we are continuously seeing is spend this much money to reduce CO2 by this much annually. So what does that actually mean, right? We're seeing that CO2 is listed in tons or metric tons. So when I hear the word ton, that brings a picture to mind of, a mountain of coal or an elephant. But CO2 is a trace gas. The weight is measured. They have to measure it in the weight. So the CO2 calculator will allow anyone to go in and put those numbers in. So in Oxford County, for instance, they wanted to transition their fleet and reduce CO2 by 400 tons annually and spend $13 million in order to do that. So what do those numbers,
I beg your pardon,
actually mean?
Sorry, Maggie, hold on for a sec. Spending $13 million to do what?
To transition their fleet to electric vehicles. And this would allow them to reduce 400 tons of CO2 every year. And counselors who don't know what 400 tons of CO2 a year is might think that that's a good idea. So in the CO2...
So they've introduced, Maggie, a whole language that gives the impression that they're doing positive, great things for the environment and the community. It's almost like they've developed this whole language that they're doing all these great things for the environment and the community. And in fact, the decision makers are kind of, like deer in headlights, don't really understand what's really going on here. And they're getting kind of hoodwinked. Is that what you're getting at here?
Absolutely. So when we break it down in the calculator, that 400 tons of CO2 is only... It's so statistically insignificant. And that's what we want to share with counselors and communities, and that they're spending about $33,000 on to reduce CO2 by 1 ton annually. It's a lot of money.
So this is this reminds me of Hans Christian Andersen's famous tale, The Emperor Has No Clothes Here. This is almost absurd that so many people have gotten onto this environmental bandwagon in the extreme. It's almost like a ideology, a religion, if you will. And they're talking their own unique languages and practices in a way that they're spending hundreds, if not billions of dollars that will impact your life. And you don't even know what's going on.
Mm-hmm. And of course, CO2, it's not a pollutant. It's a building block of life. I just put the calculations in the chat so we could see it, just so you can see it there.
Okay. Because I look at this and I live not too far from literally dozens and dozens of greenhouses, and they systematically pump CO2. They purchase it so that they can have these beautiful green plants and flowers that can thrive. So this is almost bizarre that it's not really based on science.
And the net zero programs don't take into account any of our forests or trees or pre-existing carbon sinks. So it only counts if they plant new trees in their metrics, in their equations.
Okay. And just hold on for a sec. I don't want to bury the headline here, Maggie. So you're saying that their calculations, when they're getting a municipality with a modest budget to spend $13 million on electrifying their, quote, fleet, they don't take into account in their calculation how trees are absorbing all this CO2?
Only if it's a new tree that they're planting. They will not take into account any pre-existing. And Canada has, according to...
Why?
Their own data has 318 billion trees in Canada. So on my calculator that I'm providing for everyone, so everyone can come up with these numbers, and it won't just be Maggie being able to crunch the numbers. Anyone can do this now. I include I include, how many trees do we need to preserve in order to absorb the amount of CO2 that we're talking about here? So 400 tons of CO2. How many trees do we need to absorb that a year? About 5,000. What percentage of all the trees in Canada is that? That is 0.00000000164% of all Canada's trees. We've got it covered, guys. We're good.
Wow. So the emperor has no clothes here. So these points are almost absurd in the way they develop these figures, because they're not taking into account the reality that Canada is an incredible country. It is the second largest, as I last recall, in the world.
Yeah.
And we have lots of trees. That's the understatement of the century. And so we have a situation here where we are being taken down a bunny path of disastrous decisions that are impacting Canadians' lives. And you're going at it at the local level saying, hey, just because no one's in your council chamber doesn't mean this isn't impacting people's lives and that we care. So when you show up, what kind of reception do you usually get, Maggie?
It varies. We're finding that KICLEI, and I subscribe to KICLEI's newsletter, so I can see what they're pushing out. They have been distributing talking points to municipal staff and councillors to defend the Partners for Climate Protection program. But we are aware of their arguments, and we are prepared for that now. And I would say we find essentially that there's about 2 to 3 councillors pushing the program, about the same opposed to the program, and a couple in the middle that are a bit quiet. And we find that those quiet ones tend to be pretty smart and they swing to our side. So
Interesting.
It takes time, and we like to celebrate the fact that we've done something. We might not get a win that day, but to me, doing something and participating in the process is a win, and it's a step forward, right? So we're doing things like this. So this is a prop from yesterday from our delegation to Oxford County, and we talked about their fleet. So their return on investment for $13 million. 13
point, what is that?
13
9013
billionth of 1% is what they're getting in return. So we're bringing in a few more props now, and we're standing on the side of truth. So it actually makes it quite easy to go in and present this information and to keep it simple. And I would say, further to the reception that we're getting, we're finding that the councillors pushing the program that we're opposing are bullies, and they show themselves to be bullies in that public setting, and it doesn't go well for them in the long run.
So what do you mean by bullies, Maggie, in the sense that if you don't agree with me, that somehow, well, you're a bad person, or what are you saying?
Yeah, either they'll act disinterested, or they'll ask very pointed, trying gotcha questions. They will be very dismissive. They will ask about things that are completely off topic to try and label us as conspiratorial. But the difference between the spirit of our delegates versus the councillors that are clearly defending this program for some reason is really obvious in a public setting. So when you're in the room and you're watching it, as all the councillors are in that situation, they start to see who the bully is in that situation. And most people don't like bullies. So I think it doesn't work out well for them.
Okay, I think I think, Maggie, what you're getting at is, well, a typical dynamic within a democratic process, or at least what we would hope is a democratic process, where you have healthy debate. There will be some advocates for a policy. There will be others that are neutral, and others are opposed to it.
Mm-hmm.
And our hope is that within those discussions, you can have a respectful kind of discussion about the facts, not ad hominem attacks or all kinds of red herrings, but rather an emphasis on learning from each other and saying what is really going to be, well, the policy that best serves the residents.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like you're having progress creating that kind of discussion. Is that right?
Yes. In most cases, when we do show up and we do get involved and people come to the meetings, the counselors really like that. And they do comment on how nice it is to have a full gallery. And I think that's what they appreciate most about what KICLEI is doing, is because we're pointing out how much the local council's job matters. And when we show up to a local council meeting, whether we're speaking or not, it puts them on their A game, right? And we want local government officials to be on their A game and to be asking hard questions and to be making decisions and to be saying what needs to be said. So they really appreciate that about KICLEI. And I think as we keep moving along, we will find more and more counselors that are willing to work alongside us, and which ones we want to replace at the next municipal election.
Well, that's terrific. It sounds like you're facilitating not only a movement that is about trying to create more information and common sense about public policy, but also a movement that is democratically based, where you're giving the people locally more of a voice. So bravo on you.
Yes, thank you. It's all about the civic engagement tools.
Right on. So as we wrap up our conversation, Maggie, I've been impressed by the kind of leadership and progress that you're making in the local community as you push back on global agenda. I wanted to ask you, where do you think KICLEI is going from here? What do you hope to achieve as we look to the years ahead?
Yeah, in the years ahead, what I would love to see KICLEI achieve is full town hall meetings and people engaged on the items on their agenda. I would like it to get to a point that not one UN Sustainable Development Goal action item comes on to a local agenda without somebody standing up and opposing it respectfully, and to just completely shift and get the local agenda and the local budget back on track, serving the people in the community. And these voluntary international goals have no place at that local level. And I'd like to see true local environmental stewardship restored at that local level, and those programs properly funded, not EV infrastructure and so on.
Well, I know that you are a student of environmental science and you care deeply about the environment. So I really admire your leadership, Maggie Hope Braun, and I'm so glad that you could join us for this conversation about your leadership with local communities right across our country.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for watching Leaders on the Frontier. We're a nonpartisan think tank. We explore ideas, policy, and practical solutions that can make a difference in the lives of Canadians. We do not accept any government funding. We work for you. Thank you for supporting Frontier. Visit fcpp.org to give. While you're there, be sure to check out our latest articles and research. Without open discussion and debate, you're not thinking, nor are you free. Comment below. We'd love for you to join the conversation.